Thank you, Minister. Recognizing the member for Prince George Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today to the government's budget. This is my first opportunity to congratulate you on your position in that chair, and it is great to see such a diverse group representing that chair in our Assembly, so thank you. I will get into my budget remarks, but before I do want to start by thanking the people of Prince George Mackenzie for giving me the honor of representing them in this place. It's very humbling to be elected by fellow citizens in our respective communities. It's also one of the reasons I have tremendous respect for our parliamentary democratic process. Each and every one of us was sent to this place directly by a community of citizens, and it's an honor that we should all respect and be reminded of our home communities each and every day. So thank you to the people of Lheidli First Nation, McLeod Lake Indian Band from the City of Prince George, District of Mackenzie, Salmon River, Summit Lake, Ness Lake, Bear Lake, Powder King, Mud River, and everywhere in between. I also want to thank and congratulate each and every one of you in this legislature for your elections, including the Speaker, of course, but members of the government side of the House and the third party as well. We may come from different political stripes, but I do believe we're all in this for public service. To the members of the opposite side of the House, I also want to say that like all of you, myself and members of my party would like to see the member from Victoria Beacon Hill reclaim her seat. The member and I went to University of British Columbia together, where we both started our own political journeys in the Political Science Students Association. Several talented members on the clerk's table also were in this same club at the same time, as well as Bradley Viss, a current federal Conservative MP from Abbotsford. And during that time, when the member from Victoria Beacon Hill was actually the president of the club, I was the vice president. And we remain very close friends to this day. And I'm praying for her health each and every day, and I know she's a fighter. What I remember most from my university days were the friendships formed at a really formative time in life. We could vigorously debate Canadian politics in the pit pub over a beer and still leave as friends. So I'll try my best to engage in respectful debate on the issues, but respect the individuals involved. I know although not all of us may be close friends, we should learn from one another while we're here, while staying true to our values. And it has been a conversation on values that have really restructured the status quo in British Columbia politics, and what a wild time it has been. I feel like I personally rode a roller coaster with my family, my friends, my supporters in the cars behind me. I'm glad that we persevered to work on building a brand new movement in our province through the Conservative Party of British Columbia. I'd like to thank my constituency assistants, Brenda Federink and Tiana Klein. Brenda's in Prince George and Tiana's in Mackenzie. You're both passionate about public service, and I appreciate you. I'd also like to thank my legislative assistant, Jacob Burge, research officer, Jacqueline Aubuchon, and communications officer, Ryan Painter. To my friend, Missy Nowakowski, and all of the caucus staff, thank you for stepping up to serve. It's humbling to be back here. I lived in Victoria from 2007 to 2013, serving the then government caucus, and I started as an assistant legislative assistant. So yes, 2 assistants were in my title. And I really got to work for some great MLAs and cabinet ministers during my time here. And it was an honor and a privilege then when I walked up the legislature steps, and it's even more so now as I stand with you here today. There's some key people from my campaign that helped me get elected, and I want to thank Judy Jackson, Charlotte Groot, Mike Davis, Rod and Denise McLeod, Aaron Cordoban, Todd Corrigal, Mike Millard, Dominic Chinali, Alex Huber, Tiana Klein, Matt Daigle, and Paulo Branco. Thank you for showing up each and every time I called. There were many more who knocked on doors, staffed the office, were poll captains, or anything else we asked of them. Together, we won as a team, and I'm so thankful for them. I didn't grow up in northern BC. I actually grew up in Kamloops, where my dad, John Giddens, still runs a small family business that's been operating continuously in the family for the past 111 years, so 3rd generation. He's an active volunteer to this day, and I learned about public service and giving back to my community from him. My mom, Candace Giddens, was a pediatric nurse, and I learned about care and compassion from my neighbors from her. I'm grateful for both of them. I appreciate their support for my campaign and everything they've done for me and for our entire family. One individual in particular, my wife, Elise Giddens, who I introduced in the House earlier this week, was a rock star on our campaign, of course. I'm so lucky to have her as my biggest supporter, my life partner, and my best friend. Not only is she an amazing mom to our two kids, she's a senior administrator at the College of New Caledonia. She's on the board of the Prince George Elizabeth Fry Housing Society. She's been currently completing her MBA from Dalhousie University. And now she's added one more thing to her resume, the best GoTV chair that Prince George Mackenzie has ever had, helping us get to a 61% margin of victory, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud of Elise every day, and I'm grateful for her love and for her support. When I decided to run, it was a family decision. Elise and I decided that young families needed their voice heard in the legislature. This week's budget is the perfect reason why. Our kids, Thomas and Charlie, should have every opportunity to thrive in the province of British Columbia. Thomas is 7, currently in Taekwondo and gymnastics. He's witty, thoughtful, and can very well be an MLA himself one day. Charlie is 5, is caring, he's goofy, and says he wants to be Dr. Giddens or maybe a firefighter one day. My main reason for standing in this House is to fight for their future, so they can get everything they can to get ahead in life. And this week, we heard a budget that puts their future in jeopardy. We have a government that is so addicted to spending that they're mortgaging our kids' future and our grandkids' future and saddling them with debt because of today's choices. The government announced another record structural deficit of $11 billion. As we heard from the finance critic the other day, the NDP under this premier have contributed more debt than the rest of the premiers combined since the time of Confederation. The total debt was $50 billion when the NDP took office in 2017. In this 3-year fiscal plan, debt is set to hit $208 billion with no plan whatsoever to get out of this mess. That's $36,411 owed for every man, woman, and child in British Columbia. A 177% increase over the last 5 years. Debt to GDP is rising faster than anywhere else in Canada. It's up to 27% this year, and it's on its way to 35% in the government's 3-year fiscal plan. Why does this matter? Taxpayers will be paying $5 billion this year, next year in interest payments. We've already had 3 credit rating downgrades, and believe me, there's more to come. What does this mean for our kids? As I said, $5 billion in interest payments and growing. That's more than half the Ministry of Education's entire operating budget. The $5 billion in interest savings could pay for not 1, but 3 patient care towers at the University Hospital of Northern British Columbia. And as I mentioned, my mom was a nurse, and I understand how difficult that job can be. Many dear friends work hard in our healthcare system day in and day out to support patients. Yet here we have a government that has failed British Columbians on healthcare. People deserve so much better. Wait times are among the worst in Canada. The Mackenzie Hospital has been closed 13 times this year, just since the beginning of January, and it's only the beginning of March. Northern Health is the only health region in the entire province without a cath lab for cardiac care. The rate of acute care beds per 1,000 population is 70% lower in rural BC than it is in the rest of the province. We need to see meaningful progress on these major issues in our healthcare system. It's completely reckless and irresponsible that the NDP have made choices that mean our kids and grandkids most likely won't have publicly funded access to healthcare in the future if we keep on this path. The finance minister said that the government is ensuring that every dollar delivers results for British Columbians. And over the past 5 years, public sector employment in BC has grown by a third, while private sector job growth has been virtually non-existent. We'll now hit 593,000 public sector employees. And what are the results from all that government spending? Housing starts fell 9.2% last year in a housing crisis. Food bank usage has gone up 81% the last 5 years in an affordability crisis. And as the member opposite in the last part of the debate said that, 1 in 5 British Columbians don't have a doctor today, that's in a healthcare crisis where people are struggling. The government's plan is not working for hardworking British Columbians. I grew up working in the family business serving customers. It's not easy running a small business, stressing about payroll, and supporting your employees. That's why government needs to cut red tape and get out of the way. It should be creating a competitive tax regime that encourages investment. A buddy of mine sent me a text just yesterday morning that reads, "Man, the tone of this budget is not good. Basically nothing to support private business, and now they just set aside money for government handouts, putting the province even more in debt." Wow. Well, he basically hit the reaction of the entire business community in one short text. It mirrors what the BC Chamber of Commerce said, and I quote, "Today's budget is sobering for both businesses and British Columbians. It does not deliver the economic incentives, tax changes, programs, or policy shifts that are required to kickstart our economy." Even the BCGEU said on Tuesday that we need an economic development plan. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about tariffs. The last time a serious tariff war happened, it extended the Great Depression for years and was a complete and utter disaster. President Trump is making a serious mistake, and that will only contribute to making Americans poorer. I'm a proud Canadian and always will be, and I will always stand up for Canada. We have to stand up for British Columbians right now. Since the election, I've been doing whatever I can to stand up for workers in Prince George, Mackenzie. I was standing up for the 165 workers at the Tidewater refinery. They're at risk of losing their jobs because of broken government policy. And I'm glad the Minister of Energy finally acted last week before it was too late. But we need to ask ourselves, how many more workers need to be protected right now? This is a budget speech where the Minister of Finance claimed that it's all about preparing BC's economy to withstand Trump's tariffs. But what tangible evidence do we have in this budget speech to actually suggest this government is doing anything on tariffs? There's no tariff relief plan or any jobs plan to speak of referenced in this budget. They could have chosen to follow the lead of Nova Scotia and presented a plan to lower internal trade barriers with our neighboring provinces. Mr. Speaker, they may as well get the job done and call the leader of the opposition's bill. That could give small businesses a chance to diversify their markets within Canada to withstand tariffs. That's something tangible to stand up for British Columbians right now. And as employers and workers struggle under the conditions this government has created, tariffs make a bad problem a terrible disaster. And workers will feel this hard in our province. As the opposition Labour critic, I've heard from many employers that the government has disrupted the balance in labour relations, and it's a major reason we've seen such little private sector job growth. Since 2019, there have been 12 public sector jobs created for every one in the private sector. It's completely unsustainable, and nowhere else in Canada has been at this pace. These private sector jobs matter. I met with the steelworkers today. Forestry jobs matter. The NDP have dramatically shifted the balance away from employers' ability to get ahead. The province has made a succession of changes to the Labour Code, employment standards, WorkSafe BC, added to payroll costs with the employer health tax, all without properly consulting employers. All of these compounded with higher overall tax and regulatory environment here in BC have made it a challenging and risky place to do business. And capital is starting to flee. We're seeing it time and time again now. At a time when we're worried about tariff impacts, it's also finally time that the NDP stop attacking the rights of workers, where they shut out the majority of workers unless they join NDP-favored unions. These discriminatory hiring policies and public procurement have driven up costs, limited competition, and have ultimately led to a raw deal for taxpayers. The Patello Bridge just had another increase in this budget, going up to $1.637 billion. That's $300 million more than forecast last year. Cowichan Hospital is up to $1.5 billion and is 63% over budget. This is all due to the NDP's failed labor and procurement policies. There's a better path. With a thriving private sector, we can build more projects, give all workers opportunities and a chance for powerful paychecks, and not simply rely on public sector construction as the sole source of investment. That is the path to make sure workers in this province can have a fighting chance against tariffs. It's the best way we can support families right now. We're already in a cost of living crisis, and saddling people with more layers of tax on their family budget is not going to do the job. How can we get people out of a cost of living crisis that the NDP have snowballed with their 34 new or increased taxes they've added for people and businesses in this province? The NDP have broken their election promise of $1,000 to families. What other promises are they going to break? In its place of that $1,000, we have a budget that includes the carbon tax going up 3.3 cents a litre on April 1st. That's 20% increase. It includes a tax grab of the so-called speculation tax, of course, going up again, and a new EV tax. We are at a breaking point. So how do we get out of this mess? How do we actually grow our economy in this province? Prince George Mackenzie is one of the ultimate resource ridings in this province. We have all of it, from forestry, mining, oil and gas to agriculture. Before being elected, I was part of the resource debates that we have had in communities, in media, in government-to-government meetings, and within industry. We can choose getting to yes, or we can choose giving into activists trying to shut down our resources. Our resources are critical to the prosperity of BC, and at a young age, I witnessed the impact our resource industries have on family paychecks. I worked in the resource sectors myself. My parents didn't have a lot of extra cash for university tuition, and I've always had an aversion to debt myself, so I always worked while going to school. For a couple of summers, I moved to Princeton, BC. My uncle owned a logging business and got me a job at the Weyerhaeuser sawmill. People were proud of the competitive industry, and I witnessed the paychecks supporting hundreds of families in a small town. Later, I worked at the Highland Valley Copper Mine, the largest open-pit copper mine in North America. Here was this incredible asset providing critical minerals and 1,000 high-paying jobs. My brother works there to this day. Years later, I would go on to work on the LNG projects. We had an opportunity to create a brand new industry for Canada, to create brand new and significant revenues to pay for critical services like healthcare. I know the members opposite would prefer that the LNG industry didn't exist, but here in BC, we managed to do something pretty incredible despite the NDP. The LNG story in this province is one where skilled Canadian workers prove they can build world-class projects safely, how Indigenous inclusion can be done better than ever before, and how we can change lives through jobs and economic development. I'm proud I got to work on the largest private sector investment in Canadian history. And soon the first cargoes from LNG Canada will leave the Douglas Channel, providing a direct path for value-added Canadian energy to global markets. This is the power of the private sector. So because of this past experience, I've always believed that the path to prosperity is through the private sector investment. But why would companies invest in BC at this point? The NDP just don't get resource communities. They continue moving the goalposts, and it's drying up investment going forward. We have an NDP government that attacked major projects like Site C and TMX and the LNG projects while they were in opposition. But they inherited a gift that they were too far advanced by the time they got to office. They also had a premier at the time who wasn't afraid to push back the activists in his own party. Now that these projects are at completion, this government hasn't supported the certainty needed for major investment decisions. Now we have a radical activist premier and a government that is driving BC off an economic cliff even before factoring in tariffs. You'd think that the government would want to invest in northern transportation infrastructure if it actually wanted to move projects in the north forward, projects crucial for economic development and our exports. They clearly don't. I'm putting on the record for the people in Prince George Mackenzie, there is nothing in this budget for Highway 16 whatsoever, nothing for Highway 97 north of Prince George whatsoever. The only project north of Cache Creek is the Highway 97 slide repair at Cottonwood Hill. This is an important one because the Caribou Connector is the only route in and out for many in the Caribou. But what about completing the twinning between Cache Creek and Prince George? The NDP quietly canceled the Caribou Connector program on the main artery to the north for transportation. Now let's talk about forestry. They've done nothing on the softwood file their entire term in office. And in the budget, they basically signaled that their plan is to manage the industry's decline. The government is projecting a decline in 29 million cubic meters within 3 years, despite an AAC of 60 million cubic meters. It doesn't have to be this way. But they've falsely labeled old-growth forest in interior ecosystems where that doesn't make sense. And they've created a system where we have the highest log costs in North America. About a year and a half ago, the former NDP jobs minister, now the Minister of Finance, came to Prince George and said the North will be fine. Since she said that, hundreds of forestry jobs have been lost in my riding. It's the same story in other resource sectors. The NDP have made BC the most expensive mining jurisdiction in Canada to do business, despite having critical minerals right under our feet. They've frozen permitting in our upstream natural gas development because of decision inertia. We have a government that is systematically driving out private sector opportunities. BC needs a new government to clean up this mess, and we almost got there. The good news is that we have a whole team of MLAs on this side of the House that will continue to push for better results. I want to finish with a story about the promise of British Columbia. BC used to be known as the land of prosperity, and looking north was a way for a family to get a new start. My maternal grandparents, Penny and Willie Byron, might be watching at home. I'm so fortunate to have them in my life, and so are the rest of their grandkids and all of their great-grandchildren. They moved out west from Manitoba in the 1950s. They had a Chevy pickup and $50 to their name. They were young newlyweds with a child on the way. My grandpa worked in road construction when they first arrived in the Lower Mainland, but he soon heard about opportunities in mining, and they moved their family all the way north to Cassiar, which is a ghost town now. There was an asbestos mine that had began operations in 1952 and created a little company town. That's where my mom was born. Mining fed their family as they went from Cassiar to Endako near Fraser Lake. When they came to Prince George and saw Mr. PG, my mom thought they had really made it to the big smoke. But they also spent time in the Kootenays and then eventually to Similko in Princeton, now Copper Mountain Mine. Mining supported that family of 4 kids and gave them a life to be proud of. We need to restore the promise of British Columbia again in this province, that this is a place of opportunity. We have all the natural advantages in BC, rich in resources, access to tidewater, and skilled workers in search of higher value opportunities. Instead, there was a record out-migration last year, mostly to Alberta and mostly young people. The NDP budget shows that British Columbia lost over 5,000 residents to other provinces. The government expects a net outflow of more than 14,000 residents in 2025. It doesn't have to be this way. We can create opportunities right here at home to fight back against economic headwinds. We can make decisions based on science rather than caving into activist fear-mongering. Let's make BC the investment jurisdiction of choice in Canada. Let's get to yes and stick to yes. Return BC to the province of prosperity through our resources and our major projects, Mr. Speaker. British Columbians deserve a government that listens to their concerns and acts in their best interest. The Conservative Party of British Columbia stands ready to provide the leadership and solutions necessary to achieve a prosperous future for all who live here. Let's restore the place that my grandparents moved to in search of a better opportunity for their family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't be supporting this budget.